Hi, everyone. I will introduce briefly our conversation of today. So on December 1st of 1988, the world marked the very first World AIDS Day. It remains a moment each year to honor the lives, struggles, resilience, and activism of people living with HIV across the globe. And today, more than 35 million people worldwide are living with HIV, according to the World Health Organization. The global goal shared by the World Health Organization and community-led organizations alike is to ensure that everyone, especially those most marginalized, have access to testing, treatment, harm reduction, and human rights-based care. This podcast brings together voices from INPUD, EuroNPUD, GATS, Treatments Action Group Portugal, and YouthRISE, and broader social movements of people who use drugs and living with HIV. Together, we explore the power of community organizing, peer leadership, and global solidarity. Over the next hour, we'll be discussing why our movements matter, how we fight stigma and criminalisation, and how collective action continues to shape the response to HIV worldwide. Welcome and thank you for joining the conversation. Today we have with us Claire Nasolo, a former drug user from Uganda, member of the task force members, peer navigator working with the Uganda Harm Reduction Network. Sadie, which is a queer woman who has born with HIV in South Africa, is a founder and owner of HIV Victor Media, and currently serving as both as Atlantic Fellow for Health Equity based at Tekano and a Feminist Fellow at Oxfam, South Africa. Joana Assunção, a woman who lives with HIV and also a drug user activist, social worker at GATS, Treatment Action Group, peer-to-peer program advocate, and also is part of the Anti-Discrimination Center for People Living with HIV. Antoine Bazenko, who is based in Brussels and formerly was based in Kyiv, Ukraine. Antoine has a master's degree in international economy, global known activist of the community of people who use drugs and OST patients, people living with HIV and lived experience with HCV. And Masia Iwulska, drug user activist and a woman living with HIV from Poland, now chair of EuroNPUD, the European Network of People Who Use Drugs, since 2024. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. I will, proceed for the first question, and then feel free to keep on answer and the dialogue among yourselves. So the first question I wanted to bring it today is why does World AIDS Day remain essential? And what does it mean to the communities of people living with HIV, and also for the people who use drugs movement in the context you work, you know, and you belong to? Anyone wants to jump in?
Well, stigma and inequality still exists. We are better than 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but stigma still exists. And World Day is still important because it reminds us that the fight against stigma is far from being over. For people who have HIV or use drugs, this day is about giving them a voice, and a voice to people that often are overlooked. It means visibility and respect for human rights. It's a day to reinforce that no one should be left behind, and that everybody deserves care, respect, and dignity. So it's still important to bring HIV to the surface. This day is still very important.
And I guess especially now, I was just reading a news this morning that in USA, the World AIDS Day for the first day since 1988 is not being celebrated. So I think, we should also address this. And Marcia, Antoine, Sadie.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this, that like this, in the beginning, maybe when we first like fought for the visibility of people living with HIV, and we first fight with the stigma. I have a little hope like this will be it, but no, it goes in cycles. Like people just forget, and the stigma goes on and it doesn't go away. In just like now in America, it's like this ugly head is up again, and I don't know, people are like this, but it don't stop. You have to remind every time, like this is the struggle. We have to carry on because I don't know why people are like this. They just forget.
If I may add, yeah, that. Well, for sure, World AIDS Day still matters because epidemic isn't over. I mean, I think historically it was, of course, one of the key messages because we have to fight AIDS in 2030. Well, but the epidemic isn't over, not for people who use drugs, not for people living with HIV, not for those of us who lives in the intersection of both. I think for many of us in communities, it's HIV is not a historical event. As colleagues said, it is really a daily negotiation with the stigma, with criminalisation, and underfunded health systems that treat us as an afterthought, right? For me, this day is kind of a reminder of that years I waited for treatment. It was more than 2 years. I even always remember the number of days, 712 days I remember for my treatment, because it was times when your CD4 cells had to drop lower than 200 so that you can get golden ticket and the right to get, because the treatment was not enough for all who demanded, who needed. Mm-hmm. So that was like a prioritization criteria, the 200 CD4 cells. And I was waiting in 2 years, waiting to get AIDS, because lower than 200 is pretty formally stage of AIDS. Mm-hmm. And you have to wait for your AIDS just to get finally a opportunity to get access to treatment. So this day always remind me about these years of waiting, about all my friends, our friends we lost to preventable AIDS-related tuberculosis, for instance, because in my country, in Ukraine, 65% of AIDS-related deaths is caused by tuberculosis. So mostly we lost friends not from the AIDS as such. It was always from some associated diseases, and mostly it's TB. Reminder of the barriers that punished us for using drugs instead of supporting us to stay alive. But at the same time, not to stay on the lots of that negative context, I think this day is also like a day to honor our resilience. And like networks we built ourselves, we represent well-established networks today. 20 years ago, we couldn't even dream about it, right? That as the people who use drugs, I always remember that times when syringes and needles we shared, when no one else would help, we shared between each other before like really big harm reduction programs came, and all these community-led services that in fact kept us all alive. So maybe just to summarize that. On one hand, World AIDS Day is a really essential because it forces government to confront our lives behind the statistics, because they always, raise lots of statistics this day, and because it gives our community some global platform to demand the justice on this day, dignity, and investment in rights, affirming harm reduction, what we always say. That's briefly my reply.
Thank you, Antoine. I don't know if somebody else wants to add any idea about the importance of the World AIDS Day in your communities.
Yes, so I'm also just listening to everyone's contributions, and totally I'm echoing the same sentiments. But for me, most importantly, it's about just being in the moment as a person living with HIV and remembering our journey. We have lost people along the way. We've lost people, in this fight against the stigma and against HIV. And it is a day where we get to remember how far we have come. It's a day where we also get to pat ourselves on the back as people who are living with HIV and people who are affected by HIV, to say that we have actually come such a long way. It is a day where we are also literally globally, we are all in solidarity, and we have one cause, and we are united against HIV. So it's a day where I would love to believe that we literally can even get a sense or a feel of what it feels like to live in a world that could potentially be destigmatized, that could be destigmatizing HIV, because we are all together on that day just to, just be united in saying we are destigmatizing this thing, and we acknowledge that people are there and we are affected by HIV, but we are stronger than it. So days like World AIDS Day are really important for the world and for just us as people who are living with HIV. Thank you.
Thanks, Sadie. So I think we have a lot of inputs on the importance of the World AIDS Day. I think across the times we have also all these, let's say, before we would say the fight against HIV, and now we celebrate the World AIDS Day because we recognize also the importance of keeping people alive, and especially those most marginalized communities. I think we still show up with our resilience. And as Antoine was saying, one thing that I guess it's very important is that, for instance, the first steps in harm reduction were done by the community. So we were saving our peers by exchanging syringes, by addressing HIV, informing and fighting against, for instance, pharmaceutical power that didn't want to give out the right treatments to keep people alive. So I guess these are all important things to be stressed here. I will go for the second question. Okay, so for the second question, what lessons from HIV activism in terms of self-organization, civil disobedience, and rights-based advocacy are most relevant for today's struggle led by people who use drugs? As we have here an intersectional complot, let's say, of HIV activists and drug user activists, what do you think are the most important lessons that we have learned from the HIV movement to then keep it real in the drug user activist movement?
May I?
Sure.
Well, first of all, I think, because I'm a person with both, HIV and drug use, but of course, HIV movement was organized much earlier. I think HIV activism taught us the one key thing, that no one will fight for us if we don't fight for ourselves. That's 1000% clear. Everything we have today, just remember, think retrospectively, everything we have today, treatment access, the harm reduction, human rights recognition, it all came from people living with HIV, and then later with people who use drugs, organizing, occupying government ministries, disrupting conferences with all these actions, street actions, and demanding to be seen. In some countries, let's be honest, still where key populations are not yet organized, or for instance, they are not acknowledged as a separate constituencies in CCMs, people living with HIV still represent the interests of all key populations, including people who use drugs, including sex workers, men having sex with men. I'm not saying how good or bad it is, but this is still the reality. And let's be honest, of course, HIV community has a huge experience in that. So 3 lessons which I feel most relevant today, in line with that three blocks which Joanna mentioned. For self-organization, I think key thing we must lead our own movements. It's always a matter of leaders and activists who are ready to take this responsibility. But whether we are talking about HIV activism in the 80s or drug user activism today, you will acknowledge that the most transformative change has always come from peer-led networks, like really peer-led networks where peers and people, activists take this leadership. For civil disobedience, I think sometimes we simply cannot wait for permission, right? We as I mentioned before, we distributed steroids needles before governments allowed it, and we started even peer naloxone programs also years before they were legal. And every life saved wasn't like an act of defiance. Finally, for rights-based advocacy, we learned to frame our survival not as charity but really as a matter of rights. We always saying that human rights is a key, is a fundamental thing and a cross-cutting thing. And this approach really continues to be crucial in confronting whether it's a punitive drug policies or forced rehabilitation or denial of treatment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that Anton covers almost everything. That is one thing that comes to my mind, that what lesson was learned for me was also that we took HIV and users activism has the same, like we took from doctors. This is not that we showed that this is also human rights, not only medical stuff, that not only doctors can decide, that also we are not only patients, we are humans also. So this was also what was interconnected with HIV and users, and this was different than before the human rights-based movements. So I think this was more connected with users and HIV, like we are medical stuff. Like people also like to leave it to specialists, leave it to experts. Like we showed like we are expert in our own case. We have to be listened to because we have the solutions which experts are looking for. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, addition to that, the HIV activism has taught us to live with dignity. Like when a community leads, services work better. Like for example, when we align with people who use drugs, like for example, I was a former drug user. We led through peer leadership works, whereby people with lived experience design acceptable services. So the services that are shared, those services that are gotten by the people who use drugs, are requested basically from the people that really had to go through this situation. For example, now for us, the peers, we are people that have lived this. So when we ask for a service, we ask for something that we think we need, not actually that we think we need, but something that we really need and our fellow people need. When we ask, for example, for NSP kits, it's because we know what they're used for and what they're going to help our people with. So I believe HIV activism taught us to lead with dignity, like to always lead in every situation. We always have to put our experience, how to let me say put our experience. Yes, it has helped us to be bold, and then yes, with even the evidence to the life stories. For example, me, of course, when we are asking for services, I'll bring out life stories from my past experience on the issue of the drugs. Yeah. So basically, that's all that I can share about that.
Thanks, Claire.
Also jump in with some reflections on this. I was remembering about these days when I used to work in the EVA network. So it's a network of women living with HIV in Russia, and I used to work there for several years. And I remember how we gathered and watched these documentaries about ACT UP, so, and it was, and then we went and actually people staged this protest as well. They actually chained themselves to the Ministry of Health gates, and were asking for medications, were asking for the adoption of less stigmatizing laws, and it was possible. And this is how ACT UP actually, influenced our own movements, even 20, 30 years after they have started their work. And I think it's also crucial to remember, especially now with these right-wing movements gaining strength, and all the other stuff going on. I think it's that for us as drug user movements, it's maybe it's time to watch these movies once again, about how ACT UP did their stuff, how other movements did their stuff, and maybe in some future gatherings, I don't know where we will meet in 2026, for example, but maybe it would be a good time to gather in some cafe or in some cultural space and watch these documentaries once again, to feel this spirit once again.
I guess you were talking about 120 BPMs. It's one of the best documentaries I've seen about ACT UP. So we leave here the recommendation. Yeah. Joanna, you want to add anything?
I think almost everything was talked about. I think HIV activism taught us that change starts with community power. Showed us that when most affected people lead the fight, real change happens. There are no expertise, but real people. It's about bringing into the discussion these people who experience stigma and discrimination daily, and learning from their experience. Okay, it's almost everything I say. It's about nothing about us without us ever.
We've started learning that also from the disability movement, the people living with disabilities. I think it's always a nice reference to have. But for sure, all the peer-led movements, and also these things of advocating for funding on peer-led initiatives under the umbrella of HIV, but also for the drug users movement. It starts with this intersection. For instance, the campaign of My Treatment, My Choice, another rights-based campaign. I think they learn a lot also from the HIV activism. So I go now maybe to change here a bit the order, and I would like to ask you about criminalization, poverty, and stigma, who continue to block access to treatment and prevention, and I would say even testing. And what structural changes are most urgent to protect and empower the communities you work with? What are your thoughts on this?
If I may start. Yeah, I think I will start from one key, the most strategic and the most important thing, because nothing will be transformative until criminalization ends. So what we need, first of all, of course, we need is really structural changes, not some tokenistic reforms, and the decriminalization of drug use and possession. This is the obvious. And sometimes when we say decriminalization, it sounds like a mantra, but this is really the key. This is drives HIV transmission, this blocks access to services, this fuels police violence, this fuels torture and incarceration. But of course, in line with that, investment in community-led responses, whether it's the services or advocacy or community-led monitoring, all these peer-run responses are not a luxury. It's really, we know that it's life-saving. and we know that it's cost effective, but because sometimes we can compare how much does it cost for big professional, huge civil society organizations and smaller teams, but very committed and very motivated networks of people living with HIV or people who use drugs. So governments must fund drug user network directly. Of course, it sounds like a dream because, like, we know that when it's coming to advocacy, how we think how government will give money to those who will then criticize them, but or can be considered as a kind of a troublemakers. But at the same time, this is how democratic society works. I mean, it's in normal countries, this is exactly how it happens. You should raise this criticism. Like, of course, you should bring data and not just saying you are bad, you are shit, or you're. Of course, you should really bring some proofs and data why you see the problem is there, but we still should achieve that, and as I said, directly, not as a sub grantees, what we can see now, even in the Global Fund programs. Though Global Fund also saving lives, and we really rely on its programs, but even that structure in the countries sometimes not work well for the networks of us. Maybe a few more things: abolition of compulsory rehabilitation and detention centers, because different regions, not only few countries, regions suffering from that practices, and forced rehab is a really human rights abuse, disguised as a treatment, and it destroys lives and wastes resources, which can be really redirected to the things which I mentioned above. Economic justice, of course, because poverty makes adherence harder. For instance, since I moved to Belgium, I see lots of homeless people who use drugs. Of course, there is a cultural difference, maybe in my part of Europe and Western Europe, but still, and all this poverty makes harm reduction harder, makes survival harder, and social protection, housing first approaches, which we heard well in the Lisbon recently, and meaningful employment for people who use drugs, not extras. It's really an HIV prevention in a sense, in the broader sense. And finally, of course, ending stigma within healthcare or law enforcement. But okay, let's say healthcare, because when you survived, when I, for instance, personally survived 3 denials in the medical care, and many did not, but we need mandatory anti-stigma accountability mechanisms, I guess, and not voluntary training that sometimes changes nothing. That's what I think.
Maybe I will jump in and just add a little bit on what Anton has so succinctly summarized. So I think that also one of the barriers that we've actually been experiencing, it seems like forever, but in the last couple of years, it's growing again. It's instability, actually, because people living with HIV, they are expected to adhere to treatment. At the same time, they live in systems that are designed to keep them unsafe. Like unstable housing, as Anton has mentioned, policing everywhere, poverty, fear of institutions. It could be like different institutions, social, I don't know, political, medical institutions. It's like this fear is coming from everywhere. And it seems like people living with HIV, they do not have an adherence problem, or a prevention problem. It's basically a stability problem. And again, especially now with these funding cuts coming in and with these political upheavals everywhere, so we are in this unstable situation again. And this is why people actually tend to incline towards this autocratic, authoritative rules, because it gives them this false sense of stability. And so sorry, but I think that until systems stop producing this constant crisis, this access will always remain conditional. This is why, and we see it actually in our own movement, this instability, because it also undermines our own work, it undermines our own emotional security, and sometimes even physical security, like mental health security.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I thought that 2025 will be a bad year, but coming forward, I am not looking forward to 2026 that much, actually, so because you never know what happens. Thank you.
Yeah, let's try to be more hopeful, but I guess it's also about the goals, getting back to HIV, for instance, the goals of 95, 95, 95. We are far away from achieving those, and I guess if we go back and we stand for leave no one behind, then we start seeing the people we are leaving behind. And I guess here we find some interconnections also with the war on drugs. No, that's like mostly poor Black people, women, trans women, and I think we should highlight. Yeah, the moment is not. We are not yet in the end of the bag. I used to say, I don't know if this expression exists in English, but yes, let's try to build up some resilience for these hard times as well. Anyone wants to add any idea? From your experience as well, your work in your organizations, most welcome.
Yes, I think I won't talk about what was just said before. But in Portugal, for instance, what I remember, we have now many migrants who use drugs, and there's no prevention or access to treatment for them. And for instance, in our prisons, we don't have either harm reduction. This is a question about rights instead of punishment. It should be this way. And it's crucial to advocate for the recognition of people who use drugs rights and their ability to drive meaningful change. The answer is in us, in the people who use drugs, in the people living with HIV, and this must be acknowledged by the experts. So the contribution that we can do to our communities.
And how is the situation in South Africa and Uganda and Poland?
Yeah, maybe I tell like Anton said, like a prohibition. It's the fundamental like wrong. What is wrong because of the prohibition and because of the prohibition of possession, like for your personal use even. It's you cannot have testing, like drug testing is not existent. Also consumption rooms, it cannot be under this policy, so it's all prohibited, and it's also criminalized, and police is so invasive, so people live in constant fear, and this is like driving them in this spiral. Well, I see everybody is seeing this, and it's like this terrible loophole, and nobody seems to react. Like police is saying, we have this law, we cannot act differently, and doctors are saying, oh, we cannot do nothing because of prohibition, and it's this endless, like we cannot do nothing because of prohibition, and it goes to this. No?
Yeah.
And Saidi, any good news from South Africa regarding HIV fight and drug users fight?
So I've just been listening, to everyone. And for me, I'm just thinking that in terms of good news, I don't know much, but I will say that I think the most heartwarming thing, especially from my experience as an advocate has been seeing young people more open to adhering and just being more open to learning and trying to see how they can, still go on to navigate lives even after testing positive for HIV. I think that there is still so much work that still needs to be done, but I cannot just come here and say we have not been doing the work. Unfortunately, I do appreciate the journey that advocacy has taken, not just in South Africa really, but like in the world. I started advocacy when I was like 18. I'm 30 now, and in the past 12 years, I have seen such a huge improvement, honestly, in the level of advocacy, in the language that we use when we speak about HIV, when we speak about treatment, when we speak about adherence. And I do have hope that in time, I would love to see a world where 95 is reached globally. I'd love to see a world where we do achieve that HIV-free generation that we always speak about. So I would say that even in this World AIDS Day, sure, there's still so much to do, but I think we have done really well, especially this year because it's also been a very hectic year. But I think that we have, held on to our resilient spirits and just went back to what helped us or what motivated us to start in the beginning. So, yeah, kudos to everyone, even on this panel. I'm just proud of our progress and our successes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else wants to add anything, or can I jump into another question?
I think I can share something from Ukraine, recent good win, I would say. Maybe not all people know, but CCM, or so-called country coordination mechanism, in which is a key global fund eligibility criteria and actually the condition or requirement for countries to have a right to implement global fund grants. In Ukraine, it's a really well-established and high-level body under the Cabinet of Ministers, which is called National Council on HIV and Tuberculosis. So it's a really permanent advisory consultative body, and head of this CCM is a vice prime minister, and of course all the ministers are there: Minister of Health, Minister of Justice. And from 2017 we advocated. People living with HIV, they were present there much longer. Their advocacy was successful much earlier, but from 2017 there are first three key populations: people who use drugs, sex workers, and MSM, and then other key populations joined: young people living with HIV, women living with HIV, have separate seat, prisoners, transgender people. And with all this massive representation and really a properly working CCM, because when we are making decisions, my vote is equal to the vote of a vice prime minister or minister of health. So we're really on the same level. CCM accepted or approved Cabinet of Ministers approved that CLM, community-led monitoring, and data we receive using our CLM platforms, it can be more international one like REACT or One Impact for tuberculosis, or local one, Ukrainian, we have Data Check or something where, or any other community-led monitoring tools we use. This information must be taken into considered when government provides monitoring of effectiveness of HIV or TB programs in Ukraine. So this is really a first ever in the history of Ukraine when on the Cabinet of Ministers level in the relevant documents, CLM is mentioned as a must have approach. So I think this is really something important, because last years, we talk a lot about CLM, everyone is crazy about CLM. But when it's coming to really using the data CLM for our advocacy and how much it can change something, of course, when there is no political will or commitment to accept such data from communities, it cannot be so successful. So I think this example is really something interesting. Yeah.
Yes, I guess we have a lot of lessons learned also from the global fund mechanism. It's also a problem of the sudden withdrawal sometimes in some countries. We can see that in Balkan country, I think, as well. But I was now in Mauritius for 6 months, and due to global fund presence, they could construct a peer educators task force for HIV and drug use, and that came from the Global Fund mechanism to set it up. That was then integrated by the Ministry of Social Affairs. So I guess we always have like some interesting international experiences to take home. I will maybe move to the next question, which is more like hopeful on an alliance and looking forward. So the question is, how can alliance between HIV movements, drug user unions, youth-led groups, and harm reduction organizations be strengthened? And what gives you hope for the future? I guess after addressing the barriers, we can still have some space to discuss hope for the next generation.
Where I think the future is about alliances, no? HIV movements, drug user unions, youth-led groups, and harm reduction organizations need to share their resources, amplify their voices, and fight stigma together. Because stronger alliance means stronger impact. That's science. Okay, when we share power, our power increases. It's about listening, sharing leadership, demanding rights together. I think as a social worker, I watch changes in existing social responses that are increasingly tailored to people and their voices. Respecting their integrity, and that gives me hope. As a people living with HIV and a person who uses drugs, I watch as we organize and reorganize ourselves without giving up the pressure for recognition and our legitimacy and our rights and our important role as advocates, because the answer is in us who live the problem, who live who have the experience, who suffer stigma. But this gives me hope for a brighter future, when people living with HIV and the people using drugs will be more respected and taken into account. I think there are some changes that in Portugal we can watch some changes. Probably in the next years, not so much because of the political exchanges that we are facing. But there are many programs and organizations taking forward for the recognition of people who use drugs and people living with HIV.
Yeah. So
Also,
yes. Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
No, sorry. Please go ahead.
Okay, I just quick comment. Like intersection is the word of this meeting. Like we have to work together, like from all this reason, and also because people are not like one facet. They are drug users, they are people living with HIV. It's the same person, different needs. So we have to work together. Thank you.
Too much, and I just also wanted to talk about intersection, but actually I think that the most hopeful signs are the younger activists, because the younger activists they can actually easily transition between HIV movements, for example, drug policy movements, gender justice movements, migration movements, and whatever. And they take something out of these movements, and then they create something new. So I think that for us as the dinosaurs, as I have heard on one of the meetings recently. It's crucial, to give way to the younger generation of activists, because they will be able to blend different ideas and present them as something new for the drug user movements, for example. Maybe it will be about new fundraising ideas or new advocacy ideas. And for example, now I'm at this Council of Europe meeting, the 19th Ministerial Conference of the Pompidou Group, and there was one of the prevention prizes was given to the Criss-Cross project that was implemented by Cosmic Air from Portugal, and this young queer girl was receiving this prize, and I think it's also crucial, that these young people from these intersecting movements, they are receiving these prizes, and they are doing some really important stuff. And I think that this is the way for us to come forward as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I can just echo everything what's been mentioned, but just to enforce all of that, we definitely need, I think, some shared advocacy platform. Somewhere we have it, somewhere not. Like really to reject these punitive policies across the board. We definitely need joint campaigning, because sometimes we keep doing this solo. I mean, we say intersectionality, but sometimes we forget about intersectionality in practice. So that's why when I'm saying joint campaigning, it really should bring like HIV, drug use, youth, sex workers, LGBTIQ plus movements together, like not in parallel, but really like a coalition. Well, and investments in young leaders, I can just echo, especially young people who use drugs. It's a totally different generation. I mean, even from the drug use point of view, drug scene, drug practices, it's really different. Not just by the preferences to the substances we use, but it's really a different thing. So of course, their added value is super important, and but they're often excluded from decision making. I mean, and finally, I think we should also remember about this so-called South-South solidarity, especially with all these movements in Latin America and the global South, who face now militarization, drug war violence, this epistemicide, as we say, of community knowledge. Yeah. Can we go for the hopes, or we are now talking about?
Yeah, we can hope and go for the hopes.
Okay. So what gives me hope? I think it's our generation that really refuses to apologize for who they are. Yeah, we should be very clear in that. Communities that build services when and where governments abandon them. The youth and these youngsters, activists who speak the language of rights with no fear, it really gives hope when I'm listening to them. And the global resurgence of drug user organizing, we see like really like a splash of new drug users networks and this structure in organizing. We were really waiting for that many years, and now we see that's really powerful, unapologetic, and really impossible to ignore. So hope comes from us, and it always has.
Yeah, that's so true, and also, like you said, from youth, I see hope in young people. Like I see they just don't see so many differences like we the older people I see. So they just see person, and this gives me hope. Like I don't think there will be interconnected. There will be just human rights movement in the future, I hope. So I've seen it in the young people like they are more open than I was in their age. So this gives me hope.
Yeah, there is also hope for the new generation of organizers, especially the ones that use the social medias and the local networks to mobilize quickly. And then the evidence of the community-led models, the programs that are led by the peers, also show better engagements and outcomes. So that is also another hope.
Yes. So just adding on to what Claire just said, young people on social media right now are so open to having these difficult conversations. They are so open to lending their platforms to movements that aim to empower people, aim to empower ourselves. So it is such a good time to be living in this era where there's so much information and there's so many platforms where we are able to just tap into and learn. And I always say that I feel like it's profoundly beautiful to meet like-minded people who use what they have, because using social media essentially is just using what you have and wanting to ensure that it advances whatever it is that you want to take to the world. So it has been really inspiring to just see young people using their spaces and just us not being fearful and us not being scared to call out injustice. So I am looking forward to a future where, someone did mention that hopefully in future it will just be human rights movements. And I would love to see that world where it's not so many different issues. And that is just because we just see each other as human beings and love each other and just unite. Thank you.
As someone who is stuck in between two generations, and let's say social media and not so much social media generation, I always think also that it's hopeful, yes, in one hand, but in other hand, we can be forgetting some people that still have not access to those platforms. And as someone who does community mobilization and organizing with many women that don't have so much access to these platforms, I always think, what can we do for pushing forward the community mobilization outside also the social media? So I don't know, just to close, if someone wants to give some insights on this.
I think this is where we shall introduce the peer leadership in case someone can't access the internet or they can't have this information via the different social media, the social media networks. With the help of the peer leaders, the peer heads, I think they can get this information because we know where our people are and how we can approach them. So we, the peers, since we have lived this life, so we will be able to go into the different spots, into the different areas where these people are, and we are able to pass on the different information over any ideas that we have to share with them. I think this can be solved with peers,
Yes, so summing up some local intersection work then with the more regional and international platforms, I think it's also important not forgetting our local landscapes and realities and the community we belong to and we work with and we work for. Yes, I don't know, some closing remarks from all of you?
Yes, thank you for having me in this very important talk, and also. What can I say? Like, we think to agree that prohibition is the main source of evil, and that we have to work together to have even brighter future. We see some progress that is great, and we see big dangers ahead also. But we have to have resilience. So thank you very much for having me today.
Yes, it's important to remind this talk the AIDS Day, it's important to remind that we are alive. We don't have to lie. We don't want to lie. And we make a difference right now, and we'll make a difference. So I think this talk and AIDS Day is very important to remind that we won't shut up. We always arise for our rights, for the rights of our communities. There, as we've said, there are many people in our communities that don't have their rights, the access to the rights. So we have to fight for us that we have access to community work. And that's so. Thank you very much for bringing me up for this talk.
Yes, and the other point that I would also bring out is, if at all we, the audience, that we, the ones that are here, we could pass on the efforts of supporting the peer leadership, because at the end of the day, all we need is information from these people. And however much we may ask for help, but still we need evidence. And the very evidence that we're going to get it through the peers that are going to maybe direct us to the right people that we have to get the information from, or their peers themselves. So we should, we ought to basically support the peer leadership groups. And then lastly, speak up against criminalisation, because it is still an issue where the drug users, and some of the people that are living with HIV are still considered as, should I say, criminals? Yeah. So we should also speak up against criminalization. Thank you.
And the criminalization, hopefully that it's not based on a prohibitionist approach, because I would recall in the Portuguese model that I know that is being sustained under some prohibition measures still, and even if the access of healthcare is pretty widely stable, but as Joanna was mentioned before, for instance, is not for migrant people. So we always need to have these intersections in mind. And yes, Antoine, Alexei, some closing remarks.
I just want to reiterate what everyone has been talking about, and thank you for inviting us to this important conversation. And yeah, we can move forward together only. So thank heavens we have our mother network INPUD that is collecting all the experiences from different regions and doing this global advocacy. But at the same time, we must be aware of the local stuff going on, and local context. And I think that, this idea about drug user groups in very specific places, in very specific cities or countries, it's very much alive. And let's continue to keep it this way. Thank you.
And for the final accord, what we usually say, and nothing about us without us.
Without US, yeah.
Without US, yes. as well. No, shame on them. After all they did, yeah, and keep doing, especially for my country now, politically. But okay, it's a different conversation.
Part 2.
Yeah, part 2. Yeah, it's a teaser of part 2. Spoiler of the next podcast. The war in Ukraine. Communities survive. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. What can I say?
Thank you all, and thank you for leaving some clues for the next conversations we can have. And I wish you all the best, and I thank you all for your participation. You are great, and thanks for being here today with us. This is a first session to a setup of a EuroNPUD, European Network of People Use Drugs podcast. Let's see if we can make it. And this is the World AIDS Day. Thank you all for being here.